My name's Christopher Hawley. I'm one of the directors of Software as a Service Innovation at EBSCO, and me and my colleagues here are excited to talk to you about OpenAthens. One login, one time, the easy way to unlimited access. So the way we're going to carve out the next 40 minutes with you, I'm going to give you a brief overview of OpenAthens, primarily to just set the stage, make sure we're on the same page as far as what the product is and what it offers. And then I'll turn it over to my colleagues here who will discuss OpenAthens at their own institutions. And I think you'll be interested to hear what they have to say. Lots of cool stuff going on at both of their places. So OpenAthens is used widely around the world. I think it's important to understand the scope and scale of the number of countries and organizations in which this software is involved. It is authentication software. And when I think about OpenAthens, I usually think about 4 key cornerstones with the product. How does it improve your user journey for your students, faculty, and staff? How does it improve the experience for you as staff users of the system and how it integrates in with local IT systems? And we can certainly talk about that a little bit. It has very robust reporting capabilities, and that's another cornerstone. And then the 4th cornerstone is security around the SAML protocol that's used for communication, as well as other elements of the system design. So when we're talking about OpenAthens, it's not a proxy server. It's actually, as I mentioned, a SAML handshake between systems, and it's also a part of a federation that's created. And so what makes this different? Obviously, the SAML 2.0 security protocol and then encryption, as the first bullet point says, the federation framework, as I mentioned. One key piece that I think speaks to that cornerstone of enabling an easier end user experience is the fact that it works across all devices and locations in a very common way. So you can set up easy ways to access it. Plus, it also has a single sign-on capability to it. It supports user personalization. We'll see a quick example of that. And as I mentioned, easily creating statistical reports. It is software as a service, so it's fully hosted, and it's designed by librarians for librarians, which obviously gives it that eye. From my own point of view as a librarian who then got into the technical side of things, I appreciate that because it looks and it behaves the way I expect it to. OpenAthens is developed by EduServe, and here at EBSCO, we have a partnership with the OpenAthens product in that we provide marketing services and support for it. And so that's why I'm here today talking to you about it. But here at EBSCO, we saw that there was a true need for helping to enable that user experience in a much more seamless way. And via OpenAthens authentication, you're able to do that. So a quick peek at OpenAthens for the end user. Obviously, the lives that we have, whether you're students, faculty, you're probably managing multiple devices. I have 2 iPhones and a laptop, 2 different laptops. I could be logged into my company network. I could be logged into the Starbucks network. I could be using the AT&T cellular system. And I want seamless access as I bounce between. I don't want to have to think about what network I'm on to make that work. And I know that's pretty common among a lot of our users. They might be in your library, but they're on the AT&T network with their cell phone. But they're also on the university network with their Wi-Fi. Or then they pop over to the Starbucks and start using their Wi-Fi. So dealing with these kinds of experiences, we want to make sure that, again, they have that single log-on spot, that same way to get in, and have that seamless single sign-on access. And so what OpenAthens can provide is that login, which can relate to your university or college login box. We can relate to that. So they can use the same login and password that they'd use for other things on campus. And as they get into a system, so let's say they're searching through a discovery platform, for example, so let's say they're in EBSCO land and EDS, and they find something that they want to click on, so like this first example here, the research on status of water conservation, you click on that link and you bounce out to another platform. What's nice about OpenAthens is it does that negotiating for you, for that user, through single sign-on authentication, and gets you to that full text without having to sign in again. Another advantage to this too is if you look up at the right-hand corner there, it's also handled the personalization. So it's also taken me into my personal account without having to then sign in yet again, and I automatically then have access to the things that I might have saved and other features that are unique to me as a user. So those are some of the user journey aspects that I think OpenAthens can help facilitate. OpenAthens for library staff, obviously we've gone through changes on the library side with the types of technology we're using, phones being a clear example of that and how we might be managing and monitoring things. As I mentioned, it is software as a service, so you access the interface via secure HTTP. And here we can see the user interface for the staff side of things. So then when you log in, you have access to this staff user interface. When I think about authentication, I think about my users, my resources, who has permitted access, and how that comes together. And so when we look at the interface itself, that's what my options are. I can work with and manage the accounts. I can work with and manage the resources, and from there I can also get into statistics and other kinds of preferences and things. One thing that I really like, having been a former head of a consortium, is that there's very elegant organizational structure available within OpenAthens for multi-library situations. So that could be a university with a law library, a medical library, and a main library. It could be a consortium with multiple campuses. But if you need to set up different kinds of subscriptions or different kinds of permitted access per location, OpenAthens has this very elegant organizational structure where you can set up each of the member institutions. They're then defined by a unique ID, and via that setup, you're able to provide different types of access as well as get unique reports for those portions of the organization. I mentioned tying in with the campus system and making that seamless, and OpenAthens can talk to your identity provider system. That might be an LDAP system, it might be an ADFS system, it might be a SAML-based system, a CAS environment. And there's this very easy to use tool to connect OpenAthens to your existing system to rely on the logins and passwords that it provides. From the standpoint of resources, this is one thing that I especially like as a librarian who got into system stuff, in that I'm not having to go into configuration files and code things via VI. I can use a very nice, easy to use graphical user interface, click on the resources, set up the permissions for access to those resources right here within a nice web display. And then finally, I mentioned the attribute reporting being a key piece in all of this. And what you can do is set up different attributes, whether that's based upon things like major, year at the institution, type of user, are you a faculty, are you a student, grad student, etc. And you can see usage patterns of resources based upon those categories. And so you have the flexibility at your institutions to set up those kinds of categories to then gather reports and see the kinds of things that you need. And again, it's all done in that easy-to-use graphical user interface. So hopefully that gives you a taste of what OpenAthens is all about, sets the stage for my colleagues here, and I'll turn it over to Stephen. Great.
Thank you, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Steve Ambra. I am the director of the NHTI Library in Concord, New Hampshire. And that's the library is the building with the clock tower, of course. One thing you should know, I do not work for EBSCO, but I'm here to share our library's experience with OpenAthens, and it's been a great experience. We have been up and running since we transitioned from Easy Proxy for about a year, maybe just a little bit less than a year. So we've had a lot of experience. So just a little bit about my college. We're located in the west central Monadnock region of the state of New Hampshire. And our college has about 5,000 students, which translates to about 3,000 or so FTEs. We offer over 80 degrees and also professional certificates as well. And as a community college, we run the gamut all the way from architectural engineering to visual arts, terminal degrees, et cetera. Liberal arts for us is the largest program, and that's because of transferability to universities and colleges for our graduates. But, and one thing that will sort of give you a flavor or an idea about the scale of OpenAthens' ability, NHTI is one of 7 colleges in the community college system of New Hampshire. We are 7 separate colleges. Each one has its local IT, and also there is an overarching system IT, which cares for the broader concepts. So, let me just move forward here. This is our instructional lab, and we were looking for a resource which would match the instructional lab, our ability to offer seamless and quality connection to our various resources. So if we take a look at the NHTI Library's homepage, this is unique in our system in that all 7 libraries construct their own homepage, purchase their own resources, have their own licenses, which again is a problem when using Easy Proxy. I should say that for us, our ILS is TLC, and as you can sort of tell, we have the honor, at least being one of the first libraries in the state of New Hampshire, to implement EDS, Flipster, and OpenAthens. I'm sure you've had several problems, or a number of problems, as we did with Easy Proxy. Our system office had a dedicated person, or a person, well, certainly dedicated, to Easy Proxy issues. And we were probably in communication, and of course all 7 libraries, on a daily basis about failures, about issues, and that meant that a person who could be doing other projects and onto other things had to work with Easy Proxy. So we had, we have multiple logins. We had system failures, and quite frankly, it was a mess. John Henderson, who is our local EBSCO representative, mentioned OpenAthens solution, and he came in and talked to me and Sarah Hebert, who is our assistant director. We really were very impressed with OpenAthens, and we passed this along and referred this to the system office. The OpenAthens team came through, made a presentation to our system office, and the system decided to implement it for everyone. So if you look at, this is what we have for resources. The usual suspects are located here, but there are a number of outliers, some of which never ever worked with Easy Proxy. For example, the Cornell link for ornithology, we had to do a lot of workarounds for a lot of different ones. So OpenAthens, implementing OpenAthens meant that we were able to access all of these. And the process is very simple. Once all the vendors and links are sent to OpenAthens, they become Athenized. And you can see on the left what the current links were at the time and what the Athenized links were. I had the great fortune of working with an excellent team with OpenAthens. The EBSCO contact was Beth Buffalo, who's a team member with Belinda in Australia, and together they developed a tremendous rapport back and forth. But remember, we're also working with 7 different libraries, and being the designated library to work with all the colleges, I had an opportunity to make sure that all of these links worked. They came back They were tested and then uploaded. It's very simple on the upload. EBSCO would turn on the EBSCO links, and the non-EBSCO links are implemented by a local webmaster. The total time for us, since you noticed how many different resources we had, from start to finish was several weeks. We are still working, we haven't got our last college transferred over to OpenAthens yet, but we are working with them, and by the end of the year, all 7 libraries will be transferred over. One of the things that I really wanted to mention, and I think really highlights the ability of OpenAthens. As I said, we are 7 separate colleges, 7 separate libraries, 7 separate groups of resources. And however, because we are a small state, faculty and students are going to be attending other colleges. I might be teaching in Concord. I might also be teaching in Portsmouth. And how does that get recognized? All of the names through all of our colleges come through Banner, get imported into the system office. OpenAthens generated a template, which at that time was unique. If you are at one college, you don't see any template. All you do is click on your link, you're redirected, and no problem. You have one sign-on, and you're in, and it's good. However, if you're at multiple colleges, you will get a very simple form. Once you sign in, it'll ask you, which college would you like to access? And you toggle that college, and it comes back, and you're into that college's resources. This is the only time when you have to do another sign-in is if you need to transfer out. Let's say I'm done with Portsmouth and I need to go back to Concord. Once I go back to Concord, I do have to do the sign-in. That's the only time you have multiple sign-ins. So that was a developed interface, which was marvelous. It took a while to do that, but the solution has been excellent. So what does that mean? It means single sign-on. It means virtually no problems. It means for our system office, the ability to redirect a person to other tasks and assignments. We're no longer hosting at our system office a virtually flawless function with OpenAthens for nearly a year. It's such a relief and such a pleasure to be working with them. So we can't recommend OpenAthens enough, and be happy to talk more about OpenAthens either as part of questions or after our presentation. So thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm Lucy Harrison, and I need to exit out of here real quick and switch over. My slides did not come over quite as intended, so I'm going to go back to my original ones. And we are not, we have 2 libraries that are live in OpenAthens. We are in the middle of our implementation right now. We're in the giddy honeymoon phase with OpenAthens, so it's great to hear from Stephen that the love continues once you're live as well. So, obligatory slide about Galileo. We've been online since 1995. We're Georgia's virtual library. We are an initiative of the university system. However, we serve all of the libraries in Georgia, so more than 2,000. So in addition to the currently 26 state universities and colleges in Georgia, also the technical college system, private, higher ed, academic, all of the public libraries, including those who are on the Pines ILS and those who are not, and K-12, public and private. So on some level, if you live in Georgia, this is going to be how you log into your library resources. So the problem that we were trying to address here, we had over 400 locally installed instances of EasyProxy. We did have a legacy subscription to EasyProxy that we bought one time when it was being run out of some guy's garage, and we were at the end of our upgrade process, so we were going to have to do something. We were going to have to move to something else. We were doing a lot of IP authentication on campus, which was not ideal. We've had several instances where there had been sort of bulk downloading of things, and some places had had their access cut off until we got that resolved. We also were managing hundreds of passwords for off-site access, updated and distributed quarterly, and they're not even really passwords. This is what our current Galileo portal login looks like. It's really an access code, and it's a code that's tied to your institution or your library system. You enter that, and then you get in. And that changes quarterly, we have to manage it, and they also tend to get shared and posted publicly because it's not really a password. So not a very secure way of enabling access. If we hadn't been doing it since 1995, we probably would not be able to start doing that now. Also, multiple solutions for single sign-on, everything kind of customized depending on what institution it is. For public libraries and the K-12 schools, we were only providing access at the system level. So if you're in a school district that has K-12 schools, has elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, we only know you're at that school system. So not ideal for putting somebody in at an interface that's appropriate for you can't really tell the difference between a second grader and a 12th grader. Same for public libraries, only knew that you were part of the public library system, not which branch you were at. And for everybody else, access was at the institution level, which was fine, but if you wanted to provide, say, specialized access to your law students or nursing students or different years, that was not possible. So we went through a year of visioning with an outside consultant when I came on board at Galileo about 2.5 years ago, and asked all of our stakeholder groups a lot of questions about where they wanted to see Galileo go. We ended up with a vision, vivid description, and mission, which are available on our website there at the bottom, about.galileo.usg.edu, if you want to see the whole thing. Ended up with a lot of strategic goals, one of which was all about improving the user interface. And one specific part of that was about improving authentication to provide personalized, secure access to Galileo with 1 or 2 easy steps. There's a lot of other stuff in here about customizing the interface and providing personalized interfaces that we think OpenAthens will allow us to do better, but our initial goal was just get the authentication working better. So this was our charge last fiscal year, to make authentication as easy as possible for all of those stakeholder groups, from a kindergartner through a graduate student through somebody out in the workforce using their public library. So we started by reviewing the authentication landscape. We looked at all of the different options that were out there, including the newest version of Easy Proxy, including maybe doing something in-house, and we determined that OpenAthens was really the most robust solution out there. Working with EBSCO, we introduced the concept of OpenAthens to all of our Galileo stakeholder groups. We had multiple meetings with the different groups, did demos for all of them. And in December of 2017, our Galileo steering committee said, yeah, let's move forward with OpenAthens. I do work for the Board of Regents at the university system, so we had to create an in-depth ITS business case for why we were moving to OpenAthens and get that approved. And that included looking at all of the alternatives. What if we stayed on the status quo? What if we upgraded to hosted Easy Proxy? What if we developed something in-house? But they agreed. OpenAthens looked like the best option for us. And we were actually awarded sole source in February of this year and finalized the contract in March of this year. And the idea is that we're going to start implementing OpenAthens. We are already implementing OpenAthens, but we'll have at least some of our stakeholder communities up this current fiscal year, so by summer 2019. So we really see this as a win-win. For the Galileo users and librarians, there's no need for them to learn that new password every quarter. Instead, they'll be logging in with whatever their login credentials are that they already know at their local library. There's a lot more local control of access. So if you need to block access to particular users, if you have walk-in users or a visiting professor and you want to grant them access on a temporary basis, you can do that very easily. You can manage your local resources yourself within the OpenAthens and admin module. Also, we're going to be able to provide library-specific statistics. Because we were only doing that, that code at the system level, at the school system or public library system level, we didn't have statistics for those individual libraries. Those statistics are also going to be granular enough that we're going to, for the higher ed folks who are interested in student success and return on investment, we're going to be able to provide a lot more information and granularity around that. And we're going to be able to customize your interfaces. So finally, when that second grader logs in, we'll be able to put them in an interface that's appropriate for a second grader instead of making them, choose to get into that. And then for Galileo staff and developers, we don't have to manage this huge database of passwords that gets updated quarterly. Easy Proxy was hosted locally. This is a completely cloud-hosted solution, so we don't have to worry about having proxy servers anymore. We think our data security will be improved. No more posting of those passcodes on open web pages. And it's going to allow us to develop better services, which is the end goal here. Provide better statistics, more customization, and not only for individual libraries, but we hope for different patrons with different attributes. So for example, just nursing students, right? We could provide a different interface for nursing students versus somebody who's in their first year of university. And eventually even personalization, allowing the end user themselves to determine what they would like their access to look like. So we started planning. The OpenAthens team came over from the UK. Rob Skaisbrook here is a British OpenAthens person. They came over and visited us in Athens. They met with the Galileo staff. They also met with representatives from all of our stakeholder groups. These folks take their user experience design very, very seriously. They went out into the libraries themselves. They visited 2 public universities. They visited the technical college in town. They went into the public library and met with adult patrons and a fairly reluctant group of middle school kids that included my 13-year-old daughter, and got all of their feedback on how they would like authentication to work better. We also set up webinars with vendors. OpenAthens does have a vendor federation that you need to join in order to take full advantage of OpenAthens. We reached out to local IT. We presented at the University System IT Directors Conference. We started talking to the GPLS, the folks who run the statewide Pines network, started talking to their technical librarians and managers, and also Department of Education, because this is statewide, right? And we're not gonna connect to every single one of the thousands and thousands of schools. We're gonna work with the Department of Education to come up with a solution that then can scale across the whole state. And then we ended up with an implementation timeline for the group of pilots and for everybody else. So this is what it looks like. We are currently in the middle of the pilot implementation. We're expecting that to be complete by mid-February. All 18 of our pilots will be up at that point. Then we'll move on to the university system. We expect the pilots will stop in February. We'll start implementing the rest of the university system in March, and they should all be up by April. And then we'll move on to the technical colleges. After that will come the private higher eds, and then the public libraries and K-12 will probably be next fiscal year. So what have we learned so far from all this? So no interruptions in service while we were setting up. Everything continued very smoothly. There is an asterisk there. We had one interruption in service, which was when one of the vendors we were working with got a little ahead of themselves and Athenized all of their links before we were quite ready to do that. So just be aware that there is communication that needs to happen. However, it was very easy to fix, very quick to fix, and get the access back up again. The most time-consuming aspect is getting your resources set up. And they do need to know which resources you have. Some of those will be already familiar with working with OpenAthens, some will not. We created some local workflows so that folks can upload the resources to us more easily, and then we can get them activated. And we also, for the things that we manage centrally, Galileo does e-resource negotiation, for some resources that literally the whole state gets, some that each stakeholder group gets. So we were able to script those to get those Athenized. The time commitment from local IT staff, which is the biggest concern of the librarians, that they're gonna have to find some time on their IT staff's agenda, it's minimal. I mean, in some cases, as little as half an hour, right? However, you do have, at some point, they do have to do something. And if they don't do that, if they don't turn on their communication with OpenAthens and start passing those attributes, it will not work. So get on their radar early, but it's not a lot of time. The more data that gets passed from those local identity management solutions, the more robust OpenAthens will be. OpenAthens will work if you just pass a bare minimum of information. Is this an active student or not? But if you want to get to those robust statistics and see how are my nursing students using this, you want to have those different interfaces for a second grader versus a high school student, then you have to get that information from that identity provider. And we've seen kind of the range. As we started working with the pilots, we've had several schools who were like, that's fine, we'll pass you whatever. But we've had other schools who are a little more reluctant to pass a robust set. The good news is, a decision you make during implementation does not have to, it can be changed later. The other good news is, you get to decide, no matter what you're getting from your local identity management provider, you get to decide what you then pass on to the vendor. So the control is really in your hands. I've kind of likened this in our implementation to a smartphone. We bought a smartphone. On day one, we're going to be able to make calls and send texts with it. But the more we get to trust this solution, it's going to open up the ability for us to do some really cool things with it. Vendors have been very helpful. Most of them have, who weren't already in the Open Athens Federation, have agreed to join in. We are moving very quickly with our pilots. We have uncovered a few roadblocks. For example, Open Athens did need to kind of change the way their admin interface was structured so that we could accommodate multi-campus sites, so that we as Galileo staff could be super admins and deploy things once and then have them cascade down through. They've been fabulous in doing that development. They also, Stephen mentioned the template. I think you're talking about the wayfinder here that I'm going to show in a minute. That required some extra development for us as well in order to make it embeddable in our Galileo portal. So I mentioned that this is currently what our login page looks like. You can, if you know your password, you can just log in. If you don't know, you may need to select an institution or affiliation. What it's going to look like moving forward is more like this. It'll just be a search box. And it'll say, you find your organization, you can type in the name of the organization or your email. It'll suggest some things that you've been to recently or things that match what you just entered. And then once you select where you want to log in as, it'll just take you to the current authentication process for that institution. If we're going to be kind of in a period of transition where we have libraries that are on Open Athens and some who are not for a while, so they also needed to do some development to let us continue to use our fabulous Galileo password for those who are not on Open Athens yet. Okay, future goals. We want to be able, as I mentioned, to take a really close deep dive into student success. How is usage of the library impacting student retention, grades? We are going to have to work with the local colleges and universities to get that information out, and of course it is dependent on the local identity management providers passing enough information that we can do that. So we do need those additional attributes passed in order to do that. We'd also love to do role-based customization, as I said, for example, for nursing students or elementary students. And eventually we want to get to individual customization. So our next goal, once we have the basic authentication working, is to start working on a complete redesign of our interface, taking advantage of the tools that Open Athens is going to provide to us and letting us really take that to the next generation. There's some really cool things that we're investigating in the early stages. For example, self-registration for our public libraries. Right now, if you want to get a public library card in Georgia, you've got to physically go into the library and show your rental agreement and to your water bill or whatever. Open Athens could make it possible that they could scan and upload that. Now they're planning to do that no matter what we decide. This is really more of a political policy choice than it is a technological problem. They've already got the technology piece solved. We'd love also to merge our access roles at some point. So Stephen mentioned that you do have to kind of select, am I at this college or this college? And that's certainly going to be true for us as well. But we would like at some point to be able to perhaps merge that together to make it more seamless for students, instructors, anybody who's public library patron as well as a university student. It is really an in-depth partnership with both EBSCO and Open Athens for us, and this is going to impact our plans, as I mentioned, for future portal development. So we're tackling this piece right now, improving the authentication. Next, we want to explore multiple options for libraries to customize their local interfaces. And eventually, we're going to be hoping to allow patrons to personalize their experience so that we can continue to meet their lifelong learning needs. And that's it for me. We got about 5 minutes for questions for me or Stephen or Christopher, if anybody has any.
Hi, I'm Andrea Schulman from the Harvard Business School Library.
Hi, Andrea.
I'm in the collection side of things, so I'm not in technology. I'm really sold on this, but how do I sell it to our IT department and to vendors who, we deal with vendors who don't deal with academic libraries?
So we also deal with vendors who do not deal with academic libraries. We have, remember we're serving the public libraries in K-12, so we had a lot of vendors who had not been introduced to this before. And I would say that the OpenAthens folks and the EBSCO folks did a great job of they held webinars, they explained this is what you need to do. And it works better if you join the OpenAthens Federation and agree to fully participate, but they can make it work. You can still do IP authentication if you have to, you just won't get that level of personalization. They have an easy proxy kind of thing that you could use if you had to, but over time I'm expecting more and more vendors, including many who are not academic, will join the Federation. As far as dealing with your, getting your IT staff on board, we just went in and explained to them, this is what it's gonna look like. They already knew all about identity management. The OpenAthens folks were able to set their minds at ease very easily. And I think you can have their folks, talk to our folks if you would like to set their mind at ease. It's really gone very, very smoothly so far.
If I can jump in on that. Oh, sorry. Yep. We also have some documents and white papers that are appropriate for IT point of view. So that's something else we can supply you with to help in that process.
So I'm Ralph Youngin from the American Chemical Society, and I'm chair of RA21. I just want to note that OpenAthens is working directly with the RA21 initiative as well. I want to thank the panel. I think you've done a really good job of laying out the advantages for federated authentication. I think where you could explain a little more detail for the audience is in the area where I think we probably have a mix here of people that come from institutions that are already members of an academic research federation like InCommon or Canary in Canada. And so if they are a member of a federation, why would they look to OpenAthens versus if they're not? In Stephen's case, where you're not a member of InCommon, makes perfect sense. Lucy, in your case, I'm sure there were Georgia schools that are members of InCommon and are not members of InCommon, and so you kind of have this layer on top of that. I just think it would be helpful to, it's a confusing landscape for people to understand, well, if I already am a member of a federation, do I need something else? So I think you should comment on that.
Do you want me to take a shot at it, or do you?
If you want to start.
So I'll start. I would say the difference there is that OpenAthens is really library specific and is managing the resources as well as handling the standards that allow the various interfaces to talk to each other. So it's kind of an administrative overlayer and makes it much, much simpler to do that. You might be able to do something with a lot of work and a lot of effort to approximate OpenAthens functionality. If you were doing it on your own as a member of InCommon or just using SAML or whatever at your local institution, but it's so much easier and it's so much more robust. And the usage statistics that you get, it's just so much easier.
Yeah, and I guess what I would add to that too, just kind of at a higher level, is OpenAthens isn't exclusive to other federations. Right. I'd say they complement each other really well. And I think to Lucy's comment about OpenAthens offering this easy-to-use interface to help manage these pieces, that's the advantage of plugging that in, let's say, if you're an InCommon member. And we do have InCommon members out there who then have, I think of McAllister College, who I presented with before, and they got OpenAthens simply to provide HathiTrust access. So they had that access via InCommon, but OpenAthens provided the technological ease to set up HathiTrust access. So yeah, there are different ways where this can certainly complement being parts of other federations.
Hi, Lucy. I'm Brian Erb from Falsey.
Hey,
I want to ask 4 questions.
you can ask as many questions
They're
as you
very
like.
direct questions. So one thing I wanted to ask is, can your institutions choose for a limited time period to pass more attributes? So they have a certain assessment project they're going to do, and they say, hey, for the next 6 weeks, can we flip these things on, and we're going to do a certain assessment and then turn them back off?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head if you can automatically put an end date in there, but you can certainly go in and change the settings at any point that you would like.
So how would your institutions deal with their privacy policy? Say they were going to do intermittent types of assessments like that, where they're going to be collecting more data at certain times. Does Galileo have a single privacy policy? Say when they hit their discovery tool, do the institutions have their own privacy policies?
It's at the local institutions, or
Okay.
some will pass more than others, I'm sure. All of the, do you want to speak to the data privacy of OpenAthens? Because I mean, they're in Europe, right? That is where so they are very aware of the privacy, security needs. It is all encrypted, it is all, 100% protected. And it's also, when you get to the vendor side, it is not, once you get into whatever resource it is you're actually using, OpenAthens steps back, right? So whatever happens in ProQuest stays with
Right.
ProQuest, right?
Okay.
So if we know you accessed, we don't know what you did when you got there.
Okay, so one of the other questions is, how are your institutions dealing with walk-in patrons?
So that is an issue with how are we going to deal with guest user access. Like I said, we could continue offering IP authentication on certain workstations, if that's what we wanted to do. You can also create a guest profile within OpenAthens that then is log in as this and you can go in. So I think we're still having those conversations about how best to deal with guest users.
Okay. Actually, I think you answered my fourth question in the process of the other three.
Okay,
Thanks, Lucy.
great. Sure. So we're over time. Any other final questions? All right, well, we'll hang out for a few minutes. Thank you all so much for coming out.